And so the 2024 theme park season comes to an end, and now seems like as good a time as any to reflect on what a crazy year it's been.
Yeah, there were some interesting announcements that took place, certainly things that were unexpected, and today we're going to take a look at the 10 most craziest things that happened in the theme park industry throughout the year. Rank them up from 10 all the way down to 1.
So yeah, for this we want to kind of focus on the things that we're just now learning about this year in 2024.
So there won't be any new ride openings or anything like that, but certainly some announcements about future upcoming rides would absolutely qualify. So let's start things off with our number 10 most shocking thing that happened in 2024. The world's fastest roller coaster, Formula Rosa, was closed.
Yeah, we got pretty unlucky when we went out there to visit. It had just closed about maybe max 2 weeks before we got there. Which was quite the bummer, but I think this would be a lot higher on the list if we were under the impression that it was never reopening.
Which, as of only a few days ago, the ride is back open. Same launch, same ride experience, so it clearly wasn't so they could swap out the launch system or anything. But during the time it was closed, we really had no idea what was going on. The park never said anything, and you know, if this was about any other ride, I don't know if it'd be making the top 10 for craziest things, but with a record breaker like this, you'll see a recurring trend throughout this video of high speed, extremely thrilling roller coasters having problems, and this was really just the beginning.
For the number 9 spot, an announcement that I was personally very, very excited about was Holiday Park in Germany announced that they are getting a mock extreme spinner a la Ride to Happiness, but potentially even better.
Yeah, this was a big deal. We knew that Holiday Park was announcing some sort of grand expansion, and they went all out. Not just a Mock Rides extreme spinner coaster, but also a Gerstlauer family coaster, a Smurfs dark ride. Like, they are trying to be a real competitor in Germany, which, you know, now that we have rides like Voltron out there and Phantasialand debuted Rookburg not that long ago, like, they are making a statement here at Holiday Park.
I'm all for it. The more mock extreme spinners, the better. I'm happy about it.
This is something to look forward to in 2026, but the Gerstlauer family coaster will be next year, 2025. For our number 8 spot, let's head all the way down south to Brazil. Yeah, Brazil is making the top 10 for craziest things that happened in 2024. We are getting Cacau Park, a brand new chocolate theme park with a Vekoma launch coaster.
I'm very excited to hopefully get down there next year or whatever year it opens. I guess it's probably 2027.
27, I think, is what they said.
But well, I'm jumping the gun a little bit.
Yeah, but this is a big deal. Like, anytime a new theme park is announced, it gets people's attentions. And there were actually a couple big theme park announcements throughout the year, but this is the one that specifically we wanted to highlight because Brazil seems to be making a statement that they are, like, really entering the competition when it comes to, like, the theme park scene. Because Brazil, for a long time, has really been kind of glossed over.
At the number 7 spot, we have something a little different than everything else on the list, and that is the overhaul of the DAS system at Walt Disney World. If you don't know, the DAS system is meant for people with disabilities to be able to have accommodations to get them through the lines at Walt Disney World attractions much quicker. They changed the entire system where a huge chunk of the people that would typically qualify no longer do. And the reason that we're highlighting this is because it has created such a rift between people who typically would use these accommodations and Walt Disney World. We've been seeing tons of people canceling their trips. There have been people filing with the ADA for them being non-compliant in certain ways. And it's just been kind of like a huge shift in Walt Disney World's policy, whereas in the past they've been very, very heavy on accommodating people, but you get so many people that abuse the system that this was kind of what they decided to do. It's just odd when the world is like moving towards being more accommodating and Disney's like, ooh, we might have to backpedal. Maybe we went a little too far. And I hope that they can figure it out where more, if not all the people that need it can have access.
Well, and the other big reason is because they've really been putting more of an emphasis on Lightning Lane, the paid experiences. If you can't wait in the line, you can spend some money to skip it.
Which is not ADA compliant.
Yeah, and everything towards like really emphasizing, you know, get the app and get your Genie Plus so that you can like have the best day ever, aka put more money in their pockets. And Disney is also a trendsetter, unfortunately. Some of the stuff that starts at Disney works its way down to the other parks, and so it also kind of got everyone worried, like, will we see this at the other parks across the globe? And with this one, I certainly hope not. For the number 6 spot, let's head all the way to Japan for Dododampa at Fuji-Q Highland. This was the world's fastest accelerating roller coaster. Actually sat SB&O for several years after a very unfortunate accident took place where a guest broke their back on the launch, and we didn't know why, and Fuji-Q removed the coaster, which means another world record-breaking launch coaster has now come and gone.
As someone that had their first ever trip to Japan this year and did not get to ride Dododampa, it was definitely sad. But the fact that there were several years of like hope when it inevitably decided to go for the worst case scenario, which is full closure, no reopening ever, that is sad.
Well, it really did. And I think that it's also because the Japanese are very safety oriented. Like anytime there is any little accident, it kind of takes away some of the people's trust. That's why people love bullet trains so much. There's never been a big accident with them. And so as soon as something happens on Dododampa, people are going to be like, well, I don't know if I ever want to experience that again. And so I think
roller coasters, period.
Yeah, and so I think Fuji Q is also saving face by removing this attraction. They're saying, look, we know that something happened, which unfortunately, after the investigation, it was revealed to be the guest's fault, that they weren't facing forwards, which is, they tell you audibly that's what you should do on that coaster. But it also changed their policies then of like how they went throughout things operationally. When we were at Fuji Q, it was overkill, the safety spiels, and you could tell that it was because they didn't want another incident like that again.
I had to take a class before I was allowed to ride a Jamaica.
Yeah.
Every time. It's interesting.
It's really unfortunate because the park didn't used to be like that. So you can just see how much of an impact that ride has had, and also just another worldwide icon gone.
For the number 5 spot, we're going to talk about the saga that is the Energylandia / Six Flags Mexico / Cedar Point's tilt coaster.
Yeah, this one ride went through quite the trip. Started its life over in Poland. Energylandia said we are getting a Vekoma tilt coaster.
And then they weren't.
They decided they didn't want it anymore, so tracks started showing up at Six Flags Mexico, and supposedly days before they were about to make the big announcement, there was some issue with the environment. They weren't allowed to remove the trees that they would need to in order to place the attraction, and so the new Six Flags said, we gotta think fast. Where can we send it?
Cedar Point.
Cedar Point.
Can you say saving face?
Specifically because of something else that happened at the park earlier this year, which we'll get to that one. But this was just wild. This was probably the most unexpected announcement of anything here, was Cedar Point is getting a tilt coaster in 2025 specifically.
The fact that it got passed around as much as it did is wild enough, but also the fact which we'll talk about more later, like you look at the reason of how it ended up at Cedar Point, and like you think about the fact that it's going to be right next to something that has a very, very similar style and gimmick.
Valraven.
Yeah. It starts to just unravel.
It is so
I'm not mad.
strange. I never had this on my bingo card.
No, and I'm not mad because, going to Mexico is more work than going to Cedar Point. Going to Poland is a lot more work than going to Cedar Point.
We benefit, but we do feel bad for all of the locals at Energylandia and Six Flags Mexico, because I'm sure they're very excited. And honestly, Six Flags Mexico deserved it more, just saying.
Yeah.
Number 4 is the only announcement that we officially did know about prior to 2024, but it still made the list because of how insane it is. We're talking about the merger between Six Flags and Cedar Fair, probably the biggest theme park news story of the decade.
We mainly want to focus on the impact that it's had, because that's the real news story, because, there were a lot of speculative thoughts about, is this going to be positive for Six Flags? Is it going to be negative for Cedar Fair? And it ended up kind of being reversed, where Six Flags is the one that is kind of taking the brutal beating here.
Yeah, their latest strategy has been remove the expensive, unnecessary, less than desirable attractions, and we're going to do it kind of all at once. Six Flags Great Adventure took the biggest hit, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. But also Lava Bora closed at Six Flags Over Texas. And probably the most interesting thing that happened regarding the merger earlier this year was that after a certain ride closed, they actually went ahead and announced a full lineup of new attractions coming for 2 years from now, 2026, which they've never done before.
No, and again, that's talking about the impact that this has had. It's kind of changed their entire strategy.
Yeah.
And I imagine going forward, we're going to see even more of that. So it's going to be interesting to kind of sit back and watch this unfold, because so far it's been a little bit of a...
it's been a mess.
Yeah. I hope that things get better, but the initial kind of knee-jerk reaction that the company has had
since
it happened, it has been a bit aggressive. From a fan perspective, it's been kind of like a middle finger.
Sad.
To some extent. It's oh, you love and care about this ride, or this ride is tough.
we're just going to do this all without an announcement.
Yeah, very weird, but it is exciting that they are kind of giving like a heads up of what's to come. I mean, they talked about things like what we can assume would be a 300+ foot dive coaster coming to Six Flags.
Potentially, yeah, record breaker.
Yeah, and some rides, I think at Carowinds, I think there was something at Kings Island.
First of a kind going to Magic Mountain. So there is stuff to look forward to, but as of right now, we're currently in the thick of things where it's been tough.
So as a lifelong Disney fan, the number 3 spot particularly has me sucked out of my mind. And that would be the D23 announcements of both the Villains Land coming to Magic Kingdom and the Monsters, Inc. door coaster finally coming to Hollywood Studios.
Yeah, they announced a huge lineup of new attractions going to parks all over the world. Those are the two that stood out in our minds. Villains Land has been a long time coming. It's going beyond Big Thunder, and we know they will have at least 2 attractions, and the concept art looks like one of them could be a roller coaster. Fingers crossed for a thrill ride.
I would imagine, in a Villains Land. And the door coaster is something that has been talked about ever since the movie came out, which was a long time ago at this point.
Yeah, well, and we know now that the land will actually be replacing the Muppets Courtyard, and consequently then they'll be moving the Muppets over to Rock and Roller Coaster, which was so wild.
That's like a 2.5 is like the Muppets
Muppets thing.
Yeah, becoming the Rock and Roller Coaster theme. That is just...
Yeah, but also in the D23 announcements, we also found out new details about all things going to Disney's California Adventure, including Avatar, new Pandora Land, there's a Coco ride. Over in Hong Kong, they're getting what we can only assume to be a Tower of Terror-esque Spider-Man themed drop ride. Shanghai's getting a Spider-Man themed coaster. Like, there's so much to look forward to at the Disney parks whenever they open. I'll tell you what was not an epic announcement, though. Cedar Point announces that Top Thrill 2 will be closing after only 8 days of operation. At the time, they didn't know how long it was going to be for, and we found out later it was all season. So if you did not ride Top Thrill 2, pretty much the first weekend that it was open, or any of those previews, you did not ride it this year.
As we mentioned before, Siren's Curse, the new tilt coaster, is kind of the cleaning up the mess coaster. It's like, hey... You know, we sold all of these annual passes in 2024 for a ride that didn't really stay open for long. So we're like, we're going to overcorrect and make it up to you in 2025 with hopefully Top Thrill 2 opening and also having something else to accompany it.
Yeah, so you think, I mean, if Top Thrill 2 had actually opened on time, you would not be getting a tilt coaster at Cedar Point in 2025.
Yeah, that's their whole thing. It's like, see, you're welcome.
Yeah, but this was like, I think this was a huge deal for a couple reasons. One, all eyes were on this attraction because we've never seen an overhaul like this of a new manufacturer coming in to a ride that is over 400 feet tall, built almost 20 years ago by, again, a different company. You're changing out the launch system. You're putting in new trains. This is like foreign territory. Everyone's like, how is this gonna go? And it's done by a company that had never done anything even remotely close to like this. And when it was open, it was great.
Yeah, but overall the answer to that question was it's not going to go too well because there's like a lot of little things that can go wrong, and it kind of seemed like any little thing that could go wrong did. We don't know like the specifics, obviously, of like what happened, but we just know that it led to a basically full year closure. And right now they're saying, oh, it will operate at some point in 2025, but they're not saying when. They're not saying like guaranteed as far as I know. They're like, we think it will.
Yeah, well, and we know for a fact that they are doing some testing on the attraction as of right now, so that could be a good thing. All I know is from instances in the past, as soon as you change one little thing, it typically causes a problem with another little thing, and so I imagine it's just going to be one thing after another that they have to fix up with the trains or the control system to make this ride work.
I imagine this will be very influential on the industry, like as a whole, because I feel like it might deter anything like this from ever happening again. I think indirectly, number 2 on this list led to number 1, which we're going to get to in a second. And I don't know that any other companies are going to want to take a risk like this again. Yeah,
which is unfortunate. It is unfortunate. Zamperla actually did a much smaller conversion over in Vancouver earlier this year.
Well, that went well.
That one, from what we understand, went well. We haven't been over there to experience it, but it seems like it's going at much slower speeds. That one was okay.
Yeah, and if you thought Cedar Point had the worst season of any theme park this year, we're going to talk about number 1, which was the absolute horrendous excuse for a 50th anniversary season that Six Flags Great Adventure had. starring the closure of the world's tallest and fastest at the time roller coaster.
Yeah, so thanks Formula Rosa for staying closed, because King Ka returned its record of being the world's fastest roller coaster for the last days that it could operate, and the ride will never operate ever again. That, as well as Zumanjaro, Drop of Doom, the world's tallest drop tower, Green Lantern, the B&M stand-up coaster, and several other flat rides. What a tragedy.
Yeah, and on top of that, they also had a new coaster that was supposed to open in 2024 with the Flash Vertical Velocity, and that also did not happen. So they have had, among other things, just a very messy season. But like we said, the headliner of all of that horrible stuff was the closure of King Ka, which to me was just an absolute slap in the face from their new corporate, whoever's in charge now. And as like a longtime fan of the park, it's just like devastating emotionally, because I have such a strong connection to that ride and that park. If it wasn't for, people getting the word out, there would have been no announcement and nobody would have gotten a formal last ride.
Yeah, I think that's part of what makes this so devastating, is they didn't give it a last season. They didn't even give it an official announcement until well after it had closed. And so it was all just based off of rumors and trust from us, from El Toro Ryan, and among others, saying, hey, you should probably go get your last rides in. And those who were able to make the trip were able to experience it for the last couple weekends that it was open. And a lot of people didn't. And that's what's so unfortunate about this.
And I think that you look at the people who are very much on the side of Six Flags, and they're like, they would never do something like this to their fans. I think was the real story here was how much they let those people down who believed in them and trusted them for all this time.
You could tell there was a corporate decision. A corporate was saying, hey, you need to close this ride. Like, from what I understand, the people at Great Venture did not want this gone at all. They were fighting to save it, and corporate said, too bad.
Yeah.
Get rid of it.
If you've established yourself as a company that cares about your fans, and then you pull something like this, it's pretty tough to come back from. I imagine rebuilding trust with fans is going to take a long time. And I think that, beyond just the pain that losing King Ka has caused, I think that it's going to hurt their business.
Yeah.
No?
The only saving grace to it, and this was smart with them, I'll give them credit, when they finally made the announcement, they also announced its replacement, which is a world record-breaking launch coaster of some kind, and that will open in 2026. At least there's something to look forward to. Will it be better than King Ka? I have my doubts, but we'll have to wait and see. Great Venture has an uphill battle ahead of them.
Overall, just to kind of talk about the year in general, was a lot of closures or things being taken away or something like that, and I'm
yeah. I mean,
it's interesting.
There were some exciting things to look forward to among the ones that we mentioned. Good for Canada's Wonderland getting Alpine Fury, or
Yay!
The Lost Island Raptor, awesome. So that's all great. There was a lot of positive things that came out of 2024. But
we're talking about all these record breakers. One thing that happened this year that we didn't put on the list because we don't really know what the future holds for it is Leap the Dips. That is the world's oldest roller coaster, and that hasn't operated all year, and they've kind of said it's closed for we don't know how long.
Yeah.
It might never reopen, we don't know.
A lot of rides that were planned to open this year didn't open. Rides that up until this point were open that are not open anymore. It's just frustrating. It is very sad. Change happens, and we can just hope for the best. So here's to 2025. It's going to be a crazy year. Have you seen the roster of new attractions? It's going to be wild. Until then, let us know down in the comments below what were the craziest things that happened in 2024 for you personally. Was there anything that we missed? Be sure to let us know. And stay tuned for more here at Coaster Studios. We'll see you next time.